All right, welcome to another episode of Cory Means Business podcast and YouTube show. Well, this week, man, we got some very interesting things to discuss. Got some good news, got some bad news, got some better news, and some ways that we can strategize on how to deal with the latest situation going on in our country. So glad you're joining me. Stay tuned, and we'll get right to it. All right, this week we're going to talk about obviously what's on everybody's minds, the riots. Clearly, the event of George Floyd's killing, and that's what it was, that we've all witnessed, was a shock to all of us. And obviously, there's not a person in the United States of America or anywhere in the world, I would imagine, that knows what happened, how it happened, and thinks any other thoughts besides that was a killing, it was a murder by 4 police officers, not by 1, by 4. And today we got the good news, and I've been calling for it all week, that all 4 officers be held accountable. Obviously, this Officer Chauvin was the one that was, in the video the most because the angle and so forth, which I thought was kind of suspicious, but don't want to get into so much of conspiracy stuff, in this podcast, outside of the obvious. I'm not going to say this is something that's ushering in the New World Order or something like that. Probably get some cheap views out of that, but I'd prefer to, keep the show a little more grounded than just wild conspiracy theories. If there's no data or direct evidence, I'm not going to ever speculate or extrapolate on some crazy theories that are going on. I can say this, though, about it. It definitely seemed orchestrated, and I've heard that from a lot of people. It definitely seemed orchestrated. It seemed like there was clear intent. Typically when we have officers behaving badly or losing control, and they, brutalize somebody, oftentimes death is not the goal, and you can tell they're not trying to kill somebody. They're just trying to gain control or something, In this time, though, it was different. And I know any of us that saw the video, we know it was different. And what was different about it was we had 4 police officers that were not emotional, that didn't lose control, that the entire time this situation is going on are clearly calculated. Every single one of them are clearly calculating what role they're playing in the situation. Now, Chauvin is obviously the main piece of it, just because he's sitting on the on Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 40 seconds, and that's what we perceive as being what killed him. Which I don't know if that's true or not. Obviously, none of us have seen the autopsy, but we definitely know at this point he died of asphyxiation. And there was 2 officers though that were behind the vehicle that were pressing on his back. So you had 3 officers actively restricting his diaphragm, his ability to breathe. So whether it was the neck combination, the back, two officers kneeling on his back, obviously the combination of 3 full-grown men pressing on your back, neck to buttocks, of course, is going to make it obviously difficult to breathe. It's already difficult to breathe if you're laying on your stomach because you've already got the weight restricting your diaphragm, and then you've got 3 full-grown men on your backside restricting the diaphragm greater. Maybe for a few minutes you could power through that with just strength, but everybody's going to give out. So it wasn't about officers needing to get him under control. They'd already had him under control at that point. Obviously, there's something else going on. And my fear was, with the one officer being arrested, he was just going to plead the fifth and keep quiet and not say anything, and there wouldn't be enough evidence to convict him. But now there's 4. Which is necessary, because now what we can do is we can make sure that somebody in the 4 is going to actually tell us what the hell's going on. That said, the story just doesn't make sense. You'd have to say, in order for this just to be a typical, that's the wrong choice of words, but in order for this to be another police brutality killing of an unarmed man, which, one of the problems with this is we think this goes on all day, every day. It doesn't, thank God it doesn't. But, this is a pretty rare circumstance, especially when you consider how many arrests there are. Now, most people don't know the statistics, and I didn't know them thoroughly either until I started doing some serious research, but there's about 10 million arrests every single year. 10 million, that's a lot. There's almost 1 million police officers. I bet you didn't know that either. So there's some shocking statistics most people don't know. So there's about 1 million police officers in the force. Now, they're not all in the street arresting people, clearly. But out of that million, there's about 10 million arrests of citizens that happen per year in the United States of America. So when we consider the numbers, when we consider 1 million and 10 million, and then we see how many unarmed citizens are killed of all races, and I like to include everybody, in the statistics because it's relevant. It's relevant for the conversation. It's relevant for the solution. It's relevant just for the knowledge of what's going on. And until you know what's going on in any situation, you can't ever hope to come up with a solution. And that's part of what's going on here. So the second, this is going somewhere. And as far as your business goes, we're going to talk about how to negotiate properly. And we're going to talk about how to negotiate with someone who doesn't really want to negotiate with you. So we're going to talk about hardcore negotiations. And the reason why I'm using the riots to set it up as far as hardcore negotiations in your business is because obviously we've got a lot of energy in the country and there's a lot of arguing going back and forth. And, there's all this, blame. Everybody wants to point a finger. Nobody wants to be responsible. It's just how it is. When something tragic happens, everybody wants to point a finger. And the problem with pointing a finger, unfortunately, is that it's usually wrong, unless it's being pointed the right way, which is always back at you, right? So bottom line is that all this finger pointing going on, and there's no real conversation going on. One side, thinks this, the other side thinks that, and they can't even communicate. Now, my area of expertise, as hopefully some of you know and some of you don't, I'm going to give it to you again. I manage distressed commercial assets for high-end financial institutions. And as part of that, I'm always dealing with a high level of emotionality because we're dealing with money and people's lives and, businesses that are in transitional periods and not doing well financially. And my job is to get in there and assess and fix and communicate and everything else. So I go into these hot emotional situations all the time. Now, obviously, somebody dying is very emotional, but money is pretty damn emotional too. I can tell you, people get pretty emotional when it comes to money. So I'm used to dealing with these hot situations of going in. One party has this idea, the other party has this idea. And a lot of times in these situations, both are correct. Both parties, now, the one party on the one side of any situation believes the other party's evil and against them. And the same thing for the other party. The other party's evil and against me. And the reality of it is the truth is either in the middle or it's shared, or the responsibility and the fault is also shared. Sometimes even I'll see two honest, sincere people that are trying their best have two completely different views of the same thing. And we know this phenomenon occurs. All you have to do is just, witness a car accident or have a few people witness a car accident. And everybody's going to want to tell the version. They're going to want to tell the truth. They're going to want to, see as they saw it, but because of their angle, because of the sun, because of this or that, there's going to be different versions, and some are truth and some aren't. And some will be delusional, and it's not intentional either. It's just a flat delusion. So bottom line is when you're dealing with high emotionality and you're dealing with something that can be construed as either being right or wrong, or my version of right or wrong, your version of right or wrong, you're always going to have this weird dynamic. And again, I deal with this all the time. So I'm watching this play out when it comes to George Floyd's situation. I'm watching one side of the coin wanting to blame an entire race of people for the bad actions of some officers, two of which are not even of the race that's being blamed, which is odd, right? So, and then we also look at the statistics. Now, statistically speaking, I gave it to you, 1 million cops, 10 million arrests a year. The amount of unarmed people that are killed every single year, is about 40 to 50 unarmed citizens per year are killed by police. And some are justified, right? The person was trying to go for their gun. The person was trying to knock the cop out and then strangle him to death. I mean, there's various reasons why someone unarmed is still very dangerous. And we see situations like George Floyd, where clearly there was no danger to these police officers. There was no threat to them whatsoever, to any of them, which is, again, makes it bewildering. So, we don't know the truth of why this happened. We won't know until these 4 officers speak, and hopefully they are going to. One of them is going to speak. There might probably be 4 different versions, but, there might have been something more nefarious going on. We don't know. Hopefully not, but it really looks like it, because I can't imagine the argument that 4 racist cops, if that's what this is, and we'll just at this point say it is for the sake of argument, 4 racist cops show up at the same time, at the same scene, and all 4 of them have no problem with this man dying face down on the ground. What would be the odds? Okay, what would be the odds of 4 officers all coming together, all of different races, or 1 black, 1 Asian, 2 whites? What would be the dynamic where they'd all be cool with this? And clearly they were. 3 were doing it actively, and 1 was standing guard, trying to make sure that nobody could interfere. And anybody who watched that video sees something different, you better watch it again, as difficult as it is. So, again, I having a tough time buying the 4 racist cops, with one of them being black, actually showed up at the scene and wanted to just kill this guy for no real good reason. They weren't in danger. It wasn't even a big crime. It was $20, a fake $20 bill, which we haven't even seen the fake $20 bill. I want to see that. We haven't heard from the store owner who supposedly got this $20 bill passed to them. I want to hear from them. So there's a lot more to this story than I think that we know. But that said, the emotionality is running high. And once again, we're dealing with an unarmed person being killed by the police, and 2 emotional reactions to it. One reaction to it, obviously, which has led to these riots, is that this is a systemic problem dating back 400 years. And that's why these 4 officers did what they did, which, again, that's as preposterous as the premise that 4 racist cops, 1 being black, all show up at the same scene and decide to just, without even talking about it, just kill a black guy. So I think that premise is just ridiculous. And anyone that has sense, when you examine that premise, it's completely preposterous. So the premise would have to be that those 4 cops said, you know what, since systemic racism has been going on for 400 years, I think we're going to kill this black guy today. I mean, it's just preposterous. That would never enter anyone's mind if they're doing something that heinous. It's just not something you would consider. You would consider historical data to make your decision on how horrific of a crime you're going to commit. Again, it's just a preposterous premise. So, no, I don't believe it's systemic racism. But that does not mean that we can't or we shouldn't be empathetic to the people that do feel that. Okay, and this is where my problem with the other side is. So again, I'm coming in with the mindset of a mediator. Okay, and again, this is my role all day long. I come in as a role of a mediator, and emotions are running high on both sides. Both sides think they're right. Now, but you have to bring both sides together, and you have to make them communicate, and you have to make them figure it out. And again, I've been doing this for 2 decades, so I've become pretty good at it. Now, here's what's going on. We have one group that believes it's a systemic racial problem, a racist problem, and because of systemic racism that this country's been breeding for 400 years, that now teaches police officers that they can be abusive to people of a certain color. And again, that's the premise. And of course, it's ridiculous. But I understand the emotions concerning it because, one, you have a whole other group of people who are considered leaders telling you that's how it is. And then you have another group of people obviously being led to believe that has some basis and some kind of a thought process, which again, I don't know what, I've never murdered anybody, so I don't know what that would that even entail. But I can't imagine, I don't think anybody else that hasn't murdered somebody can imagine that you're going to sit there and again have a thought process based on murdering somebody, based on whether or not society believes it's acceptable, which we already know that's not true. We already know society does not believe it's acceptable. So again, the premise falls apart on that end. And again, that's the other side of this. The other side of this is, white people obviously, and not wanting to be vilified over the actions of a few people's evilness. I mean, that's what it comes down to. So when one party wants to blame the other side as a whole for the actions of a few, that obviously is completely out of logic or reason of any kind. So you can't really blame the other side for kicking back on that, because you're saying that I need to be responsible because of the tone of my skin for the choice that somebody else did to doing something evil. See, that is obviously the premise is completely ridiculous. So you can't blame those people for kicking back on that. The same would be said for, looking at any black crime statistics, black on white crime statistics, and then saying, well, geez, see, this is evidence that all black people are bad because these black people did this. It's preposterous. I know that, that, everybody knows that. So the fact that we can just reverse that around and say that it works the other way, but not that way, again, it's a failed premise. So what's going on here? Both sides still have some legitimacy to their feelings, and that's really where it comes down to in my negotiation. What I'm going to teach you here, hopefully, is going to be how to negotiate difficult situations when you have two parties that have different views. They're both right and they're both wrong. Okay. So is there racism? Absolutely. Of course there is. It's preposterous to think there isn't. And the idea that we are ever going to be able to live in some kind of a utopia where there's not going to be any racism, there's not going to be any injustice, there isn't going to be anybody doing anything bad, everybody's going to be behaved well and do good. I mean, it's nonsense. It's not humans. That's not what we are. Understand what we are. We are a very intelligent animal that has been endowed with the Spirit of God, okay? But it doesn't make us any less of an animal because we have the Spirit of Jesus Christ and God. So while we have higher capacity for understanding, while we have a higher capacity for conceptual things and spirituality and emotionality and empathy, which animals, some animals do actually have empathy. That's been proven, but we have it on a higher level. That said, it does not mean that in there isn't just the same animalistic tendencies and 2 million years worth of survival instincts still in there that are going to make people do bad shit. It's going to happen. So this idea that there's going to be this utopia ever, that justice for all the time, it's nonsense. The only way that we can balance a civilization, which I hope we still have after this is all over, is to have the understanding that there's going to be some people that do some bad shit. You have to accept that premise. And anybody that tries to tell you that's not how it's going to be, they're lying to you. And they're trying to trick you. Because anybody who tries to tell me that they're going to be able to make a law or do a speech, or this leader gets elected, they're going to be able to bring everybody together and it's going to be peace and harmony and no one's going to do any bad shit. If anybody tells me that, instantly I know they're a con artist. There's no other word for it. They're a con artist. So if somebody does tell you there's this possibility of this utopia where we're going to be able to create this perfect society and everyone's going to be behaved and no one's going to do any bad thing of any color. There's a certain color that will never do bad again. I mean, that's asinine. And if you believe that, there's nothing I can say to you that's going to change your mind. You're in a world of hurt. You're going to be you're in for a tough life if you buy into that nonsense. The reality of it is there's going to be a certain percentage of people that do bad shit. And it's going to come from all races. It's going to come from all ethnic backgrounds. It's going to come from all cultures. It's going to come from all societies, all civilizations. The balance has to be the understanding that the majority of those people, the majority of people that you are having a civilization with are actually good people. You have to accept that premise. And if you don't, civilization will crumble. If there is a group of people, well, no, it doesn't matter what they are, Muslims, you can base it on religion, you could base it on color, you could base it on the country they came from. It doesn't matter what you're basing this tribal ideology on. If you base your belief system on a tribal ideology, meaning that this tribe's good, that tribe's bad. People that look like this are good, people that look like that are bad. If you base it on that, civilization collapses. It's a fact. You cannot have civilization and tribalism at the same time. So this idea that we're going to be able to make any decisions based on somebody's ethnicity, culture, place of birth, skin color, it's just absolute nonsense. It's a ridiculous construct. And anyone who tries to convince you this construct has any basis in reality or plausibility, again, is just trying to con you. So I'll say this to both groups. If you have anyone that's saying to you, any leaders, any community leaders, activists, friends, colleagues, whatever, telling you that those things are possible, they're lying to you, they're tricking you, and you better start looking for what their motive is, because they have one, and it's not in your benefit. Matter of fact, I don't agree with a lot of how he went about it, but Malcolm X comes to mind. He understood this, and he understood it very well. He said, look, be very, very careful of people that come to you with a smile on their face and they're going to help. These are the most dangerous people, because they come to you under the disguise of a smile and a helping hand. And these very well might be the people that are trying to destroy you. So never think that because somebody doesn't agree with your position, that that's the enemy. And that somebody that agrees with your position, that they're your friend, okay? No, the most dangerous person that you're going to experience is someone who agrees with you a little too easy. And Malcolm X knew this. And Malcolm X said it. He said very clearly, the most dangerous person the black community will ever have is a white liberal. Now, liberal meant something different back then. It's morphed a little bit. Back then, it was more extreme. It was, anybody that's trying to go against the norms of the society as far as a societal ideology, how it would work, be leery of that person. So if they're saying, hey, I'd like to destroy this country, and I agree with you, well, then you have to know right there that they don't have your intentions. What they're trying to do is they're trying to recruit you to be a soldier in their army. And what they will do is they will lie to you, and they will tell you things to make you want to be aligned with them, so they can recruit you as a soldier in their army. And very well, their means, the place they're trying to go, does not mean it's in your best interest. So while you may have these sympathizers, right? And particularly we look at these riots, we look at people like, groups like Antifa, other groups that are in there. And you say, this isn't really their fight, but why are they there so vigorously? And again, that's what he was warning about. You have to be very, very suspect. Now, it's not to say that if you're getting some support from the other side, that's somehow be suspicious of that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying just always be cognizant of people's motivations when it comes to them telling you what to do, what to think, how to act. So if ever you have anyone coming to you telling you how to think, how to act, you instantly, again, don't get hyper defensive, but instantly say, let me double check these people's motivations to make sure they're aligning with what is best for me. And you'll find a lot of times it isn't, okay? What they want ultimately and what you want ultimately does not match. And they're trying to tell you that they're in whatever you're in to get you to align with them, so that later on when they go to make their move towards whatever their end goal is, that they're going to be looking to recruit you. And again, if we're talking about Antifa and their desire to obviously upend America as we know it, well, then obviously they're looking for soldiers all over the place, and it's going to be very easy for them to try to align with a particular group, because they're going to want to recruit you for their cause. It's not because they believe in your cause or they want what's best for you. Matter of fact, it's the opposite. So be very aware of that when you're dealing with this type of stuff. And again, that's on the one side. On the other side, where you have somebody that's not agreeing with you, don't think that they don't have your best interest in mind. They very well might. Okay, just because someone does not agree with your assessment of a particular situation does not necessarily mean that they have your best your worst outcome in mind. Again, that's always a good thing. And again, never think that for instance, when I'm dealing with the situations that I deal with, I already know that my clients and myself have the best interests for everybody in mind. There's just a balancing act between interests and perspectives, and that has to be something that's made aware of. So, but both sides have to understand how the other side feels. So again, trying to get back to the negotiation part of it, when you're going into a negotiation, and again, this is going to be really very relevant for your business. If you're in sales, this is very relevant, because a lot of times in sales and in business, we're going to deal with a high level of emotionality. And that's why it's very, very, very prudent for this. the first rule in negotiating a hard negotiation is you have to empathize with the other side. Now, you don't have to agree with them. I'm not saying you agree with them. I'm not saying that you say, oh, yeah, you're right. You don't want to do that, especially if you don't really agree that they're right. And you don't have to. That's the good thing about it. You don't have to. So when you're negotiating, you do not necessarily have to agree with the other side. What you do have to do to open up the line of communication properly is you have to empathize with the other side. So while, again, you may not agree with what their assessment is, you may not agree with what their perspective is, you do have to say these words. I understand how you feel. And I can relate to how strongly you feel about it. And once you acknowledge that, the great thing about it is that person that says, okay, this person isn't my enemy. Anybody who's going to say that they understand how I feel and they can empathize with how I feel, or even better, they want to know how I feel, that will open up a line of communication that you didn't have previously. And so that's one of the things that I use when I go into these hard negotiations in business is I'll say, first of all, I'll just make up a name, obviously. I'll say, Gary, look, I completely understand how you feel. I see where you're coming from. I know that you have a lot of energy on that. And because I say that, now we've got goodwill going. And now that we have the goodwill going, we can then start to communicate better. So where I'm seeing a lot of this division, and the reason why we're rioting, and the reason why we're in the streets going against each other, and then you have this whole separate facet of people that are saying this is completely wrong and this and that, has nothing to do with George Floyd. It has nothing to do with whether or not his death was heinous and a murder by 4 cops. Of course it was. It has to do with the premise that is this a systemic racist problem? Is an entire group of people to blame for it? The answer there is no. And you know that. And anyone claiming that it is knows that's not true. And anyone that is telling you it's true, question their motives. Do they have your best interest in mind? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say heed Malcolm X's words and understand that the people that you think might be the most supportive of what you're doing and what you're saying are going to be the most suspect for whether or not they have your best interest in mind. And I know this anytime somebody agrees with me too easily, especially when I know that I'm not even positively that I'm sure that I'm right. I may be feeling a certain way, but am I sure? Have I calculated everything? Have I looked at everything? And if I doubt that I've got 100% clarity on my viewpoint, and then somebody's right behind me saying, yep, you're right, you're 100% right. I mean, instantly I got to know, hold on, I might be falling for something here, because if I'm not 100% sure, but they are, something's amiss, right? Because any reasonable person should always have second thoughts about any conclusions they've come to. Any decision, especially major ones, major assumptions, you have to make sure that you have clarity on. So as part of what's going on with the protests and hence the riots, and again, the protests and the riots are two separate things. I thoroughly believe that there's some protesters out there that are good, well-intentioned. They want to, make a point of view be heard. They want to, obviously show their solidarity with the idea that police brutality is a problem and it needs to be dealt with on a better basis. And that's all great. And again, I don't think that there's many people that are against that at all. But then we have the rioters, we have people throwing rocks. Then we also have the idea, what's going on with the bricks being delivered in the neighborhoods where this is going on. I mean, how are pallets of bricks just showing up? That's a little odd, right? How are big things of rocks showing up in major cities? I've been downtown New York many times. There's no rocks. There is no rocks anywhere. All the rocks in Central Park are fake. So there's no rocks. So this idea there's a whole bunch of rocks to throw in downtown Manhattan is nonsense. So somebody's delivering these rocks, these bricks. Who is that? I don't know why we're not looking into that more. But there's a lot more going on here, and you need to know that. No matter what side of this you're on, there's more at play here than meets the eye and that either side believes is true. Now, that said, again, the emotionality, you got to understand it. So you may not agree with it. You may have looked at the statistics as I have, and there just isn't statistical evidence to back up or support that there's some kind of a systemic racial injustice problem going on with the police or with white America or anything. There isn't. There's no statistical evidence for any such thing. Now, again, not to discount anybody's feelings about how they feel about it. Now, those feelings could be based on lots of things. Most times feelings, especially when somebody is a little too emotional about something, I already know that the feelings are actually based upon misinformation. And if you have feelings based on misinformation, again, you have those feelings. No one can blame you for that, but slow it down and maybe reconsider, or maybe at least consider, hey, maybe before I draw a line in the sand and just say I'm immovable, let me go take a look at some other information. And also let me listen. And again, one of the things that I train people when I'm coaching them and when I'm dealing with them in these high emotionality situations, I say, look, I want to hear you. I want to listen to you. I want to understand where you're coming from. And then once I start that communication, then I say, okay, but you also got to be willing to do that too, right? If you want to be heard, if you want to be understood, if you want your emotions to be made relevant, well, then you got to do the same. You have to give what you get. You have to do it. And if you don't, then don't be shocked that you don't get. And no, there's no just saying, well, I want it because I'm owed it. No, you're not. We're not owed anything by anybody to anybody. Nobody owes me anything. You don't owe me to listen to this podcast. I don't owe you to do it. Nobody owes anybody a thing. Okay. Until there's an agreement in place, then we owe each other. But until then, there's nothing that's owed. So when you ask for attention, when you ask to communicate with people, you have to ask for it. So getting into communication and into negotiating, and again, this is gonna be relevant for business, better relationships with your spouses, your children, all of it. It's the same thing. People are people. Doesn't matter what the situation is. So again, ask if it's okay to listen. So here's how you do it. Can I listen to you? Would that be all right with you? Can I hear you out on this situation, on this subject matter? Instantly, the person's going to start telling you how they feel. It's an instant open line of communication. Now I want to also ask questions about it. Okay. I just want to hear them once and say, okay, now that you got your piece to say it, let me say my piece. Nope, too fast. If you do that, people are going to kick back emotionally. You don't want that. So you have to ask questions and relevant questions. And then in these questions, they've got to be relevant. Now don't ask a ton, ask 3. That's always my rule, 3 questions. And the questions are going to be relevant to this situation, not overly prying, not overly probing, not trying to ask for specific intimate information or anything that somebody would be on guard about. It's just going to be base questions to get a better understanding of the emotions or the facts or the situation. And then you got to empathize as you're getting this information back. You've got to empathize. I see. I understand. Oh, I understand that. Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. No, I understand exactly where you're coming from. I see why you would feel that way. Not agreeing. And again, there's a difference. Don't agree. Don't say you're right. That's different, especially if you know they're not right. But you can say, I understand how you would see that. I understand how you'd feel like that. I understand why that would absolutely be how you would perceive that. Things like that. Things that don't trap you to necessarily agreeing with them, but at the same time, empathizing with them. Okay, now this is the fourth move. And again, this is the fourth move. Empathizing is the third move. The fourth move is going to be ask for your turn to let them know how you feel. Okay, now that I understand where you're coming from, can I ask you a favor? Can I tell you how I feel about it? And get permission. Okay, get permission to be heard. Don't demand to be heard. And this is the problem with the riots. And this is the problem with, demanding to be heard. It doesn't work. How many times are we going to go through this? I mean, this is not the first time, is it? This has been going on. And it's going to keep going on until the people, the group that wants to be heard asks for permission to be heard. This is paramount. You have to ask to be heard. And then you have to empathize with the other side to a degree. I mean, you have to do it. If you don't do it, then don't expect anybody to empathize with you. If you can't listen to their perspective and their perception, don't expect them to listen to yours. That's just a rule of communication. And again, I don't know why this isn't, I know why. I know why this isn't told to people that are protesting and rioting, because the powers that be, the people that are telling them to do it, and the people that are there with them that they think are their friends that aren't their friends, tell them, demand to be heard, and don't you listen to anything they have to say. Now, why would they say that? Why would someone who really cares about you, if that's what they're saying, okay, these leaders, these sympathizers, if they truly cared about you, why would they tell you, demand to be heard and do not listen to the other side? If someone were to tell me that in a negotiation, and that's what this is a negotiation. It's supposed to be anyway. It's supposed to be a negotiation. It isn't being approached like a negotiation. So if someone's telling you, don't listen to the other side, demand to be heard, instantly, I can tell you right now, having done high-level negotiations, high-energy, high-emotional negotiations for nearly a quarter of a century, it's already over. No one's going to hear your perspective. No one's going to listen to you. It isn't going to happen. You cannot approach it in a hostile way. You have to empathize with the other side. You have to ask to listen, and you have to ask to be heard. And you've got to ask relevant questions. Now, when in that negotiation, real communication will occur. And now real solutions can be found, okay? And a lot of times when you walk away from these negotiations, when you walk away from this for this type of communication, you own up to the things you were wrong about. And like I say, when I do these negotiations, when I mediate these negotiations, both sides were wrong, both sides were right. And I can tell you in this situation, both sides are wrong, both sides are right. It's a fact. One side claims that an entire race is to blame for the actions of a few. That is dead wrong. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And you know it. And anyone that says it isn't is lying or has other motives, or you're a bad person. The other side that says, I don't care how you feel, you're wrong, that's wrong. Always care how the other side feels. Doesn't matter if you agree with it or not. Don't sit there and throw out statistics, okay? Not until you get to the ask to be heard part. So how's it work? Ask to listen. Ask questions, 3 questions about it so you have a better understanding and they feel like they've told you and you've listened. And again, be very attentive. Empathize with that. So as the information comes back, empathize with it. Don't have to agree with it. You have to empathize with it. Then 4th, and this is key, ask for you to be heard. And then the process should swing the other way just fine, especially if the one party who's wanting to control the conversation takes the higher road, then obviously the other party has to acquiesce to that as well. So that's how negotiations work, and they work very, very well, and this is how problems are solved. Problems are not solved by demanding to be heard. Problems are not solved by hijacking people, hijacking conversations. It doesn't work. I don't care what signs you make. I don't care what you burn down. I don't care what you throw. I don't care if you seek revenge by killing other people. It doesn't work. So the riots are wrong. Protesting is not. The riots are wrong. But protesting needs to be limited to the fact that, hey, do I have your attention? Yes, you do. Then you say, can I hear you out? Then you listen. If you keep going with the protest and then you keep telling the other side that you will not, under any circumstances, hear their point of view, even after they listen to your point of view, it's lost. It's over. This is why we're stuck in this perpetual situation, because you will not give in to basic communication and negotiations. And you must, if you want solutions, if you really want it. I'm not convinced that anybody wants it, but if you want it, you must do it. And then you can talk about real solutions. And the real solutions will be easy to find. They always are. When I get through these negotiations, I get both sides on this negotiation path. And again, this will be in any relationship, business relationship, customers, people that come into your business, partners, employees, anybody that you do this with. Again, take it to your personal life. It works like a charm. Trust me. And if this were to happen in our current national dialogue, the solutions to the problems would be instantaneous. There is just a faction of each group that doesn't want solutions. That's the truth. Now, the majority of people do. There's just a certain part of this group that does not want solutions and a certain part of this group that does not want solutions. They're happy being at odds. They want it. They need it because they're trying to recruit those people to their war. That has nothing to do with the benefits of the mass majority. A majority of people can be very easily manipulated by a minority of people. And it happens. It happens a lot. And it's happening now. It's happening on both the left and the right. And again, you apply my techniques, I guarantee we could open up a real conversation about all this stuff. We could find the solutions. We could look at the data. We could share stories. There would be a bonding that would occur. I keep hearing this thing, well, they got to unite us, When I negotiate these situations and I have both parties on either side communicating in this fashion, there is always unity. There's always solutions. There's always give and take. There's always compromise. It always happens. Quarter of a century, I've never failed once doing this. This is what's needed right now. We got to get doing it. So try it. Anybody's watching this video or listening to this podcast, try this. Try it out. I guarantee it's going to work. try it out because this isn't over. The riots are probably going to be over here in a day or two. Protests are going to be over in a day or two. But this conversation for our nation is not over. We know this. It's going to come up again. So learn these techniques, learn it for your business, learn it for your personal life, and then be able to use it in situations like this so you can communicate a lot better. Better communication is going to lead to solutions and understanding, unity, and really that's what we need, because we all, as one nation, we all go together. There's certain people that can carve out their own good fortunes, right, without having to help anybody else. That ain't me. That's probably not you. All right. We are going to have to help a lot of people in order to be able to get where we want to go. And it's always the best way. And again, I've got my paperback book out now. It's online, Amazon. Not a heavy read, pretty easy read. I lay a lot of this stuff out here. This has the blueprint for how to be successful financially, which a lot of the they call it social economic problems. A lot of our social problems occur because of financial issues, right? A lot of marriages fail because of financial issues. A lot of crime is committed because of financial issues. A lot of what goes on in the Black community and a lot of the records of young children, getting into criminal problems early in life because they don't feel they have a way out is caused because of financial trouble. And again, in this book, there's the solution for it, 100% the solution for it. In chapter 15 of the book, I go into selling and exactly how to negotiate, not to the depth we've into today, but a solid foundation. And I'll teach it a lot more. And in selling, obviously, as most of you can know, is really the art and the science. It's combined. There's some science to it. There's some art to it. It's the combination of the two coming together to create communication that's effective for negotiation. That's what selling is. I have something I think would work for you as a solution. You need a solution. Let's marry your need for a solution with my solution. And now we do business. That's sales. And it occurs all the time, everywhere you go. At home, at work, on your way to work, it occurs all. So chapter 15 covers that. If you haven't gotten my book yet, please do. It's going to be the greatest thing you've ever invested in, dollar for dollar wise. I'm not saying the greatest thing you've ever invested in, but dollar for dollar it is. And again, if you get this book, I guarantee you it's going to give you so much insight. And I'm going to start to give away a bunch of free copies of the book, and I'm also going to start to give away some coaching services to kind of help out, especially for small businesses as much as they've been hurt. I'm going to give away some services, so look for that. I'm actually going to start running some giveaways for some coaching services to help out. That's a way that I can give back. If I can teach someone how to make millions of dollars, that's a lot better than giving them a few hundred and sending them on their way. So I will do that. I will help in that way. We can get through this together, and we can come out of it the other side a lot better off. So appreciate you. We're going a little long today, so I'm going to cut it off now, but I appreciate you sticking around, listening to what we talked about here today. This is an ongoing conversation. It's going to morph into a whole bunch of different things, but I always want to make sure it stays, business and money. And again, a lot of the problems we see going on right now are because of bad financial situations of people. Cure the financial situations, and a lot of the social problems, criminal problems, drug addiction, alcoholism. I could go on for hours on this book, but I've got chapters in here about that, about alcoholism, drug addiction, high crime rates, all related to economics and whether or not people know how to make money. This book will teach you how to make money. We will be able to solve a lot of these problems with the knowledge that's in this book. So please get it. Please get it. Thanks so much. See you guys in the next one.